Did you miss your deadline to renew your Medicaid coverage? You can still send your completed annual review form to Healthy Connections Medicaid. You may be assigned to another health plan, but you can ask to come back to First Choice within 60 days of renewed Medicaid eligibility. It's your family. It's your choice. First Choice is the right choice. Renew and choose us. Visit selecthealthofsc.com/renew to learn more.
You are listening to a CNA podcast. Welcome to the Climate Conversations. I'm your host, Julie Yoo. Now picture this, a world where our main course includes fried crickets, where insects take center stage on our plates. Now it may sound unconventional, even a little creepy, but with a booming global population to feed, insects could very well be the future of food. As technology evolves and chefs worldwide get more creative in the kitchen, insects are shedding their taboo image and emerging as a serious business opportunity. Now, joining us today is a young trailblazer who's at the forefront of this insect revolution. We are joined by Arseniy Olkhovskiy, the 24-year-old founder of FlyFeed, a startup that's cooking up new ways to bring cheap, nutritious, and sustainably farmed bugs onto more plates. So Arseniy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Julie, for having me today.
When we think about what to eat, the bugs are not typically the first thing that comes to mind. So I wonder what sparked your interest in insect protein and insect farming in the first place.
You're definitely right that bugs are not the first thing to come into minds of people. We actually get lots of questions about ick effect when people are not really happy with even the idea of insect-based chocolate or something. But I think the key to answering this lies in the question of what are the challenges humanity faces in terms of food we produce, basically. How do we ensure that everyone on the earth has access to nutritious, healthy food for people to feel good, to be productive, to be creative about their lives? And we have almost 3 billion people, so almost half of the population of the planet, who are facing malnutrition on a regular basis. And from our understanding, it seems like the conservative ways to produce food we use, they reach the scalability limits. Basically, we can't actually just use more land to raise more crops because we already use almost 40% of land which is available on planet Earth right now. At the same time, we are reaching same scalability limits with resources like fishing, for example, which humanity relied on for a long time. So we're facing this in almost every part of how people produce food. So basically, when we think about why it would be beneficial for humanity to adapt more and more insects into our food chain, the answer lies into how insect farming addresses each of these problems I've mentioned.
Yeah, so Arseniy, fascinating how you're so passionate about solving the feed and food crisis. I'm sure a lot of listeners out there who may be scratching their heads thinking, but insects? Just how nutritious are insects, and are they safe to eat?
I can understand those listeners really well because I was the first person to think that there's no way I'm going to do insect farming. But the answer is in fact really, really simple. Human bodies, they need animal protein to actually develop in the most healthy way, and insects are animal protein. In terms of the quality of protein, I would say that the closest reference would be chicken meat. But what's more important is we actually need 100 times less land to produce the same amounts of protein as soy farmers or beef farmers or chicken farmers would need. So all of this leads us to the protein, which is already used in human food. Worldwide, it's used in human food. In Europe, there's obviously a great history of using insects for medical and definitely safe. People already managed to create tasty products from insect protein, like, for example, protein bars or bread with insects. It's amazing as well, and it's better for the health as well as normal bread.
So there are both health aspects and also environmental benefits as well. So let's delve into FlyFeed and the technology involved. I understand your company produces insect protein, fat, and fertilizers as well. Can you walk us through the production process briefly?
So basically, on the most abstract level, what we do is we construct those black boxes, huge industrial factories, where as an input we have organic byproducts of farming or food production, like, for example, wasted fruits and vegetables from local farms, things like that. And as an output, we have insect protein flour, so this white flour, which can be used in animal feed or as a raw material for human food, for alternative milk products, for protein bars I've mentioned, alternative meat, and so on and so on. Oils, which can be used for animal feed, for human food, but as well for pharmacy reasons or cosmetics reasons, for example. And fertilizers, which is, I would say, the most natural fertilizer in the world, because in nature, the land is fertilized by what insects leave on the land after eating and after they die. Now, if we deep dive into this is actually super high-tech type of production, because insects, they are right now mostly farmed in more than 100,000 boxes. So how do we dose them? How do we ensure that there's the right amount of waste in every box and right amount of larvae in every box? This basically means that we need to ensure an efficient way to constantly control climate in hundreds of thousands of boxes where natural process is happening there. And then there's processing issue, like which technology do you need to transform the larvae into clean, properly separated proteins, all of those processing technologies. So the combination of this expertise is basically what we do and how it works.
That's a complex and intricate production process. So I just want to zoom into that unique primary insect that you mentioned, black soldier flies. What sets them apart from other insects like, say, crickets?
That's a great question. Black soldier flies are, in fact, one of the most popular farming types of insects. There are others, like mealworms, for example. And I would say the main reason to make black soldier flies our choice was several parameters. First, black soldier flies are the most tolerant to different type of feeds they will need to encounter. So, for example, the mealworms, they will mostly feed only on dry type of waste, but this is not type of waste humanity normally generates. Normally we generate something wet. Fruits, they're wet. Vegetables, they're wet. Beer waste, etc., etc., etc. So if you do mealworms, you'll need to spend extra money, which will result in higher cost. And our primary mission is basically making food significantly cheaper, like 3-4 times cheaper than chicken. So we've seen this as a way to reduce cost. Then we've seen that, for example, with crickets, they have higher share of protein in their body because they need to gain muscle to move and jump. They also need higher space to grow. They are also much more competitive than black soldier fly larvae, so crickets would attack each other during their feeding process, even if there's no need to compete for food. They would just attack each other like for fun. I don't have specific insight why they did this, but they did this. So all of these reasons combined with just extremely high growth rates, so no other farming insect grow as fast as black soldier flies, combined with insanely high reproduction rates. Basically, one pair of our flies leaves like 500 to 1,000 eggs. This basically means that you need really small population to keep the whole factory running, which once again makes you more efficient. So all of this combined with the ideal nutritional profile made it a no-brainer for us to work with black soldier fly.
I also noticed that instead of starting up a farm in Europe, you ventured to Vietnam. What sort of factors made Vietnam an attractive location for you?
I would say that's a part of our culture as a team and my personal culture as entrepreneur. Basically, when we decided on Vietnam, I've moved there with my wife and cat. And I mean, cats are super not happy about changing locations. Wives also, normally, but my wife is in love with Vietnam.
Okay, that's good to know.
And one of the biggest problems for insect farming is scalability. Now, the European companies mostly have issues with scalability because of raw materials available. Because this business is good as long as you are able to get raw materials cheap or almost for free. So basically you process something which someone would like to get rid of. Where would you basically find 40,000 tons of organic waste? 40,000 tons is insane amount when you talk about standardized organic byproducts in a radius of like 5 kilometers from your factory. There's almost no locations like this in Europe. Then we've seen that companies spend lots of money on climate control. It's really complicated issue and it's really expensive both in terms of R&D and in terms of operational expenses. So what we realized was like, what's the point of spending insane amounts of money trying to get 25 degrees in winter in Europe within your huge farming facility? Other places in the world will have this climate naturally, while you'll also have highly developed, huge agriculture, which will gladly provide you with the raw materials. So through this process, we came to this vision, and this leads us to the fact that our first commercial scale factory starts in Vietnam.
There was a time in the middle of last year when it seemed that the China we're familiar with was a completely different place. When the rest of the world moved on from the COVID-19 pandemic, as many as 300 million Chinese people were under some form of a mandatory lockdown.
There were only two things on my mind: to find food and to not go crazy.
Then suddenly, the people decided to take things into their own hands. For the first time in more than 30 years, protests swept through China. And just like that, Zero COVID ended. Join me, Wei Du, for a look back at the extraordinary year in China and hear how it might have changed the country for good. Catch Red Wall Inside China's Zero COVID World, a two-part podcast series by CNA. It's available now on the CNA and Me Listen apps, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts.
Currently, your insects are primarily used for animal feed and pet food, but understand that your plan is to develop human food using insects within the next 5 years. How's the plan coming along?
There's lots of conversation about how ready are people to accept insects in their food.
Right.
And I would say the biggest problem with insects as a human food is that they cost the same as traditional products or higher than traditional products, because just on small scale production level, you can't be as efficient as conservative ways to produce food. At the same time, they are not taster. So it's no-brainer that people don't really get amazed about buying a product which is more expensive, which has some potential emotional tendency to not accept it. And at the same time, it doesn't offer you anything in exchange. But what insects have, what other products, conventional products, don't have, is a potential to be 4 or 5 times cheaper than those conventional products. First, get high scale, get a technology and operations and worldwide presence which lets you be super cheap. Then switch the production of those proteins into human food.
Right. Like you said, shifting food habits, cultural biases are undoubtedly difficult, and building the trust and confidence seems to be the key when it comes to alternative food products. I mean, do you think providing transparency about how insects are raised, the diet, would that help dispel worries?
I do think this definitely can be one of the solutions needed. There's definitely no feature, like one strong move which can be done so people would occasionally accept insects. It will need accumulated effort in lots of directions, because in most cases you can't guide the final customer through your production process, because it's just not what we do with chocolate production, for example, or with chicken meat production. And I would assure you, if we actually guide people through a process of chicken meat production, they would be less tendent to actually eat chicken. So I would say that with insects, it's mostly about first having the regulation and strict control in place to ensure that companies which do insect-based food are actually putting the health and safety first. They don't try to just scale and cheap product at the cost of consumers. Then, when it's regulated, it's more about of awareness that, hey guys, these people, you've put your trust in them through elections, you've put your trust in them through seeing their expertise. They confirm that this is safe. They eat it themselves. They enjoy it themselves. This is how they integrate it in their lives. And finally, be able to show the product in actual supermarkets, which people see as like, it's not in a larvae form, it's not in cricket form. It's more in like alternative meat form, like alternative steaks, alternative chicken fillets, alternative milk, which we have animal proteins, which we don't have in soy milk or almond milk, for example. All those products which are same taste, same form you're used to, you're sure that this is safe for your health, and they are cheaper. In a world where 3 billion people can't afford minimally healthy food in their region, we do believe this will be enough.
So you're saying that insect-based food disguising themselves as chips or pasta, you mentioned protein bars. Do you think this is a viable strategy to change people's minds?
I do so. I mean, we don't consume cow in a natural form. In most of the cases, we don't consume chicken or fish in their natural form. We consume nuggets whatsoever. So there's no need to expect that insect farming needs to be developed here in a different way. We'll also need to use insect products as a raw material, which enables us to create products which customers need.
I want to get your thoughts on this recent report highlighting that over 2,000 species of insects are actually consumed in 140 different countries around
Exactly.
Asia, Pacific, Americas, and Africa. Does that fact shape your expansion plans?
There's nothing new in this knowledge for FlyFeed because, in fact, on top of those more than 2,000 species which are already consumed, there are more than 3 million species of insects in the world which do lots of valuable jobs for humanity right now. For example, there are termites, which can be, in fact, used for processing wood waste, which we mostly burn. There are snails, which can be used to process waste we generate in our water reservoir cities. There are molds which we can use to process plastic waste. So talking about FlyFeed specifically, with those 10 factories, we will focus on black soldier flies specifically because we generate this unique experience of how do we raise specifically black soldier flies in a more efficient, safe way. But at the same time, we see ourselves as a company which doesn't just leverage the knowledge of black soldier flies. It leverages the knowledge of insects and at the same time knowledge of the problems humanity faces. So this is why we do already do some work in R&D towards other insect species, and we definitely envision investing more towards like termites, snails, molds, whatsoever.
A lot in the pipeline there. Arseniy. And lastly, before I let you go, I want your outlook for the global bug-related markets in the coming years. That's a big sigh, Arseniy.
Because this is actually a really complex question. A lot of things going on right now. New companies emerge, new partnerships emerge, new regulations emerge. In general, I would envision that this market will continue growing faster than grows right now because the biggest limitation for growth was the supply quantities, and companies are slowly figuring out. So there will be more and more feed companies adapting this product into their product pipelines. We do also see that regulators around the world follow the best practices. Probably right now, the European countries have the most developed regulation in insect farming. And we see that brands are already either looking or privately working on the R&D of their own insect-based products, both in pet foods, in human food, everywhere. So the market will just see more and more of those products. So this threshold we've been discussing regarding the acceptance of these products in the world, this will be moved by the sort of collective effort of the regulators, of the insect farming companies who scale their supplies, so they make it possible for more different companies to try this as a product and form their opinion. At the same time, by large international brands which will present their insect-based products soon, or are already presenting them, in fact.
Arseniy, well, I'm really looking forward to a future where insects play a crucial role in feeding the world sustainably, and we wish you the very best of luck with your future endeavors. Thank you so much for your time.
So do I. Thank you for the conversation. It was a pleasure.
Well, thanks to my guest, Arseniy Olkhovskiy. And thank you all for tuning in. We hope you enjoy this episode. Do remember to subscribe and like this podcast so you know when a new episode drops. You can find CNA's climate and sustainability coverage online at cna.asia. The team behind this podcast is Duan Chen, Cyan Win, Jacqueline Chen, and Crispina Robert. And I'm Julie Yoo, signing off.
Evolving education for a changing world. Expand your career opportunities and earn an MBA from University of Cincinnati Online Lindner College of Business. Designed for busy professionals, UC Online MBA is flexible, personalized, and supports students from application all the way through graduation. Get the world-class degree you deserve without sacrificing work or family commitments. Apply now at online.uc.edu/MBA.